Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today on Credit Matters. My name is Michael Rausch, and I'm the Director for the Center for Disability Inclusive Community Development here at the National Disability Institute. Before we get started with our webinar, we would like to go over some housekeeping tips. Listening to the webinar. The audio for today's webinar can be accessed using computer audio or by calling in by phone. If you select computer audio, please make sure your speakers are turned on or your headphones are plugged in. If you do not have sound capabilities on your computer or prefer to listen by phone, you can dial 1-929-205-6099. The meeting code is 879-3188-1103. Next slide. Captioning. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found by clicking on the CC button in your Zoom controls at the bottom of the screen. If you do not see the captions after clicking the button, please alert the host via the chat box. You may also view captions in your browser at streamet.net/PLAYER/EVENT=NDI. Submitting questions. Please use the Q&A box to submit any questions you have during the webinar, and we will direct them accordingly. If you have a question, if your question is not answered during the webinar, or are you listening by phone and not logged in, you may email me, Michael Rausch, at mroush@ndi-inc.org. Technical assistance. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box to send a message to the NDI host, such as NDI Webinars, NDI host, or you may email Katie Achenbach at KAUCHENBACH@ndi-inc.org. Please note this webinar is being recorded and the materials will be placed on the following websites at National Disability Institute, which is nationaldisabilityinstitute.org/resources/webinars. Also on the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities website at www.illinois.gov/site/ICDD. Great. So before we get started, for those of you who are new to the National Disability Institute, at the National Disability Institute, we envision a society in which people with disabilities have the same opportunities to achieve financial stability and independence as people without disabilities. Our mission is to collaborate and innovate to build a better financial future for people with disabilities and their families. To learn more about the National Disability Institute, you can go to www.nationaldisabilityinstitute.org. Next slide, please. We would like to give a special thanks for the Financial Wellness for People with Disabilities initiative in the state of Illinois. And this is in partnership with the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities, and we appreciate their support in recognizing the importance of financial wellness for people with disabilities. Before we get into the overview and the content for our webinar, we do have 3 polling questions that we would like to ask. Katie, if you could pull up the polling questions, please. Great. So if you could take a moment to answer these questions. The first question is, how much do you know about getting free copies of your 3 credit reports? You can mark, I don't know anything about this, I know a little about this, or I know a lot about this. The second question, how much do you know about understanding what is on the credit reports? Again, you can answer, I don't know anything about this, I know a little about this, I know a lot about this. And finally, the third question, how much do you know about steps you can take to build better credit? Again, your response may be, I don't know anything about this, I know a little about this, or I know a lot about this. So please take a few seconds to respond to the polling questions. Great. Thank you so much. Katie, we can close the poll and go to the next slide. Great. So again, today our webinar is on Credit Matters. And credit is really an important piece for us to look at and to understand. Good credit plays an important role in our financial lives, and it is essential for us to understand what credit is and how to build your credit effectively and efficiently. In today's webinar, we'll look at why we focus on credit, overview of the importance, getting and checking your credit report, building and improving credit, and how to protect credit, as well as additional resources and Q&A. Next slide. So you all are in for a really great treat today, as we have a great presenter. Irene and I have known each other for several years now and passed each other at different conferences pre-COVID-19. And Irene is a policy analyst at the Office of Community Affairs at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has put together a wide variety of great resources and tools to help individuals build financial wellness. And today, Irene is going to share with us about how we make credit work for us, but to share also with you a plethora of resources and tools that you will be able to access via the web or even order to help you build a positive future with your credit. So with that, Irene, I thank you so much for joining us, and we'll turn it over to you to start the presentation.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Michael. I am delighted to be here. Here virtually, at least. I really wish we could do these sort of things in person again. I miss meeting people. I'd love to meet all of you and hear your stories and hear your questions and experiences in person, but I'm afraid this is how we've got to do it. I was telling the NDI folks before we started that because this was a Zoom meeting, I wasn't sure if the presenter would be on video or not. Sometimes we are, so I carefully put on a work outfit and jewelry, so you can't see me, but just picture me looking very, very professional today for this webinar. Not something that happens every day, as so many of us are working from home. So if you go to the next slide. I assume I'm not the one advancing the slides, right? So because I'm a government employee, I do have to start with our standard disclaimer saying that while I am presenting on behalf of the CFPB, this is not legal interpretation, guidance, or advice from the CFPB, and the opinions and views are my own and may not represent the Bureau's views. We start every presentation like that. And then next slide, please. And then just quickly, probably many of you know who we are, some of you may not, but we are a federal agency, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and we regulate the offering and provision of consumer financial protection laws and services. So we regulate financial institutions and other financial service providers. And we also educate and empower consumers to make better informed financial decisions. And it's, of course, that second part that we're here about today around educating and empowering consumers. The agency actually had its 10th birthday 2 days ago, so we've been around for 10 years. We were created right after the last recession in 2007, 2008, or the law to create us came out of that, and then we were actually created in 2010. Next slide, please. So just so you know where I sit within the Bureau, I am on the consumer-facing side. The Office of Community Affairs, which was formerly known as the Office of Financial Empowerment, we had a name change, is part of the Consumer Education and Engagement Division. And our office specifically serves populations who may lack full and affordable access to financial services. So people with low and moderate incomes, low wealth, otherwise financially vulnerable or underserved. That is who we are focusing on in our work. Next slide. We'll talk about a number of resources. I wanted to give you just an example. You can see how we are serving different populations. We'll mostly today talk about some resources in the Your Money, Your Goals toolkit, which is meant to help people have money conversations and learn about money topics in a range of settings. People who are social workers or caseworkers and consumers themselves can use these. And within that suite of resources, there are some companion guides for populations we focus on. So there's one for Native communities. There is one for people with disabilities, and I believe that NDI may have used it, or you may have seen it. If you haven't, it's a useful resource potentially for some of the folks on this call. We also have one on reentry. So just want to let you know that those were out there. Next slide. Thank you. Just so you can see, what we're going to really focus in on today is a very user-friendly, consumer-friendly booklet. These are just kind of pictures of these little booklets, but there are 4 of them. They're very plain language, simple, but have very useful tools. One's on paying bills and being behind on bills. One's on debt. One is on savings, and then the one we'll focus on today is Want Credit to Work for You. These are all things that you can order. Again, we're focusing on one today. So next slide. Thank you. So just again, so we're going to talk about credit today. I'll just say a couple words of background. Most likely all of you are very familiar or, from personal experience or for work or other settings about why credit is important to focus on. But obviously having a good credit record can be a very important aspect of financial well-being. So credit reports, credit records, credit scores, of course, influence whether you can access credit at all, and then how much you will pay for credit. It also has an impact on things like housing and employment, because many places use credit records to screen people for housing and employment. And people who are economically vulnerable are more likely to have limited financial resources, and the lack of a credit record can even further limit their opportunities. So it's a very important thing to understand. Next slide. Just one word before we dive into the content. We've done a lot of work looking at people who do not have a credit score and who are sort of locked out of the credit system in a way. We did a study that showed that about 11% of American consumers, adults, do not have a credit record at all. They do not appear they don't have files in the credit bureaus. And then another 8% or so have a record, but there's not enough information in it to get a credit score. And either because there's not enough data or it's old, you haven't had credit recently. So when you add those numbers up, that's about 20% of the population, which is 45 million Americans do not have a credit score. And these consumers face potentially higher costs for borrowing money, for getting access to credit, to housing and employment. So we will talk briefly later about ways people who don't have a credit history or score can actually move into the system. Next slide, please. So we will now dive in. My understanding is that the folks on this call, you are a mix of individual consumers who are managing your finances yourselves, and also providers or practitioners who are working with people and providing services. And so I will kind of pitch this to both of you. So there's information that I'll go over. It'll be useful, hopefully, to an individual consumer. But the things I'm showing, the tools I'm showing are something that you, if you're a practitioner, you can use with your clients. So you can order these booklets and use these tools. So hopefully it's kind of useful for both. Next slide, please. If you were to have one of these booklets, the first thing, inside it there are 8 different tools around how to get a copy of your credit report, how to make sure it's accurate, how to dispute errors if there are errors, how you can build good credit, how you can improve your credit score and understand it, whether you should use credit, and what to do in identity theft. There's also a tool on resources you can turn to for help. We won't talk about that today because you would want to have information there that's Illinois specific, and so we'll just note that exists. They are color-coded. The yellow ones The first three are really about preparing and requesting a report and getting ready to, take the first steps around credit. The ones in the middle, the blue-green ones, are about action planning and deciding when to use credit. And then the red ones, particularly the one on identity theft, is really about for immediate challenges and needs. So we're going to go through 7 of 8. I'll show you the content in there and tell you some of the knowledge that you would get from using this toolkit. So next slide. The first thing in the toolkit is a worksheet that can help you think about why you're interested in credit, what credit's doing for you, how it's helping or harming you. So there's a little scale up top where you can determine, have I never used credit? I've run into trouble using credit and stopped using it. I use it, but I struggle to keep up with payments. I'm making progress in improving my credit, and I'm using credit and savings to make large purchases. So that's kind of a continuum of not doing anything with credit to using it well, with struggling in the middle. And so thinking about that can help you determine what you want to do, what kind of tools are going to be useful to you in working with credit. Secondly, it asks, is credit holding you back in any area around, say, getting an apartment or a car or a cell phone or a house? Is it affecting your family? And again, that can help you think about the challenges you're having. And the third question is, how could improving your credit help you achieve a goal? So for example, if you said, hey, I need to buy some assistive technology, but I don't have the money, I'm going to need to get some kind of loan, that would be a goal that having good credit could help you achieve. So this is just to help you think about what is it, again, if you're an individual, what is it I need credit for? For a provider, you could sit down with your client and go through this and just help people think about what they're trying to achieve. Next slide, please. There we go. Just quickly, again, we often do this training in person, and so people will actually have a physical book. I'll just mention what it looks like, although now you can't see it because we're not seeing the next slide. There we go. Each of the 7 topics I'm going to talk about today, we have a front page that kind of tells you what the tool will do, what you might need to use it. In the middle, there's a fold-out tool, which I'll describe, what you can learn from it. And then on the back, there's more information, more detailed information. I won't say as much about the third page for each of these because it's fairly detailed, but again, it's all available. You can order these booklets. You can see it online. So we'll dive in now. Next slide. We'll start with the first tool, first topic, which is how do we get a free copy of my credit report? And, here what we want to do is help you understand how to get a free copy of your credit report, when and how to request it, and then what to do with it once you get it. As many of you know, probably the credit report is a record. This is not the credit score. The report is the record of all of your bill paying history, or some of your bill paying history, public records like bankruptcies and things like that, and inquiries by lenders. We'll talk a little more about that later. This doesn't tell you your score, but this is the report that will be used by credit providers, banks, landlords, and you want to make sure to check this and see what's on it. So next slide. We have a worksheet that can help you know how to get your credit report. So normally we tell people you should get it once a year because you can get the credit report free every year from each of the 3 major providers, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. As it happens right now, because of COVID, those 3 credit bureaus are making reports free, available free every week. They're trying to help consumers who are really trying to see how their credit's being impacted. So this tool says once a year, but you can check it more often. I mean, you probably wouldn't want to check it every week unless you're really, really into your credit. But until April of 2021, you can actually get credit reports more frequently, which is a nice option to have. But in order to get it, you want to go to the correct website, annualcreditreport.com. There are others with similar names that are not the official federally authorized source for free credit reports, and those will typically try to sell you something and may require you to pay. So you want to make sure to go to annualcreditreport.com. You can get it online by doing that. You can also download a form from that website and mail it in, and it can be received by mail. Or if you are not using a computer, you can also call annualcreditreport.com by phone. The number is there, 877-322-8228, and they will mail a form to you to fill out and mail back. So it can be done all by mail. And then, you know, it's a good idea to check regularly. And what we have on the other side of the sheet here is you can fill out this little thing to remind yourself, I'm going to check my reports on different dates. You can write down the dates you plan to, and that can help you keep track of when you plan to do that. So that's something, again, that you could fill this out yourself, or if you're working with clients, they could fill it out and you could help them actually get those credit reports. Next slide. Here we are on the back side is a little bit more information. I won't go through all of it, but I'll just note one of the things that happens when you request that report is they want to make sure it's you. They don't want to give your credit report out to a stranger. So you're asked to answer some questions. This is often confusing. I was thrown by it myself when I checked. They'll ask you some security questions, such as what's the amount of your mortgage, if you have one, or what was a previous home address, and they'll give you some options. And that's a way that they're checking to see that it's you. My tip to the wise here is that they usually ask a question that the answer is none of the above. And I've heard people say, oh my God, I must have this loan. It asks if this is my mortgage loan and I don't have one. But in fact, the correct answer was none of the above. So just, don't be too unnerved by the questions. Answer as best you can. If you can't get in, you can always do it by mail. They have other ways to check if you do it by mail. So just wanted to give you that little hint if you are trying to get your report. So let's move on to the next tool. So once you've gotten your credit report, the next thing you want to do is make sure that the credit report is accurate. And so this information we're going through now is to help you review the information on your credit report and spot any errors that you or questions that you might have. So next slide. When you fold open the toolkit, or you to have it in front of you, we have this checklist that you can use to review the 5 different sections that are on your credit report. Credit reports are a little confusing sometimes. They're not always the most user-friendly, but they will all have these 5 sections. And the idea is you should go through them and find anything that's not accurate or doesn't belong to you. So the first section is header and identifying information. So you want to make sure that your name is spelled correctly, the social security number is correct, phone number is correct. The other things in that section, make sure everything is correct. If it isn't, you can kind of make a note of that because you're going to want to get that changed. The second section is public record information. If you've had bankruptcies or tax liens against you, some of you will have nothing in that section. That's generally a good thing, but it will have things like that. So make sure everything there looks accurate. The third section is collection agency account information. So if you've had any accounts sent into collections because you haven't been paying, or in some cases things will appear there that don't belong to you. So again, make a note of that because you're going to want to try to get that removed. Make sure everything looks accurate. And kind of the main part of the credit report in some ways is the credit account information. And that is where they're going to list all of the different trade accounts. So things like if you have credit cards, if you have a mortgage, if you have a car loan, that's where these things will appear. And you want to make sure that if there are things there that they're listed correctly. If it says it's 30 days delinquent, if that's not true, you're going to want to get that changed. So look at all of those, make sure that you're listed accurately. If there are accounts you've closed, that they're listed as closed, like if you had a credit card that you closed. So look at all that. And then the last piece is inquiries made to your account. And an inquiry is when you've applied for credit and the lender has reached out to say, I want to see this person's credit report. Just take a look and if you check your credit report, it should not appear there. That is not an inquiry that will appear. If you have applied for credit, it will appear. If you apply for a lot of credit, make a lot of credit inquiries, it can actually cause your score to go down a little bit. But just checking your credit report through annualcreditreport.com will not impact your score. But here you will see if you recently applied for a credit card, you'll see that. So again, make sure all that looks accurate. And the one tip we want to add here is beware of companies promising to remove negative information from your credit report. You have the legal right to do this yourself for free. So you're really better off doing it yourself if you can, rather than paying for a service to do that for you. So next slide, the additional information that's on the back, I'll just say, oh, that one is not there actually. That talks a little bit more about your right to dispute information. So now we're going to jump to the next tool, the third one, which is how do I get errors in my credit report? fixed. Actually, whoop, woohoo. So once you've looked over your credit report and you've seen if there are errors, if you did find errors, you want to fix them because having things that are incorrect on your credit report can make your credit report look worse. It can make your credit score lower and can cause credit to be more expensive or cause you other issues. So this tool will help you figure out who to contact and what information to get to them to get those errors fixed. So next slide, getting into the actual worksheet. This worksheet can help you dispute the errors that you may find on your credit report. And you can fill out one of these for each error that you have found, if you have found any. And this is just to help you get organized to dispute. So you can write down here what the error is. So say, hey, this says my credit report account is 60 days delinquent, but I've been paying on time. What is it you want the company to do? So in this case, you would want it to fix that to make it, to make it current. Or if there's something that doesn't belong to you, you want it removed. And then if you have documents, receipts, letters, evidence, if you have that, gather all that so that you are prepared to share that. And then you can actually there's two ways you can dispute. You can send a letter, and we actually have a sample letter on our website, sample dispute letter, so you can actually download that and fill in your information. So it makes it easier, uses the the kind of right language, and mail it off to to one of two places, and I'll tell you that in a minute. Or now you can do it online. So if you go into your credit report, there's a place where you can check and say, I want to dispute this, and then it'll ask for more information. So those are two options. We generally, and actually, so go ahead and go to the next slide. Let's see if, yeah. So we actually suggest, or it's a good idea to dispute both with the company. So like if your credit card company sent the wrong information saying you're delinquent and you're not, you can dispute with the credit card company, and you can also dispute with the credit reporting agency. So Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. And generally, if you can do both, that's a good idea because that will make it more likely that it gets fixed. The company, either the credit reporting agency or the reporter, or meaning like the credit card or mortgage company, generally has 30 days to investigate the dispute, and then they have to let you know what the result was. If they agree with you, they will fix it. You should check to make sure that that happened by looking at your credit report again. If you have errors, or sorry, if you have problems with this, we do have a complaint. The CFPB has a complaint function where you can complain and say, hey, I said that, I showed that this was not correct and they haven't fixed it. cfpb.gov/complaint. You can also do it by phone. And so that is an option if you're having trouble getting those errors resolved. So now we'll go to the next tool. So now we've gone through the kind of preparing parts, which is getting your credit report, looking for errors, and disputing errors if there are errors. So now, great, you've done that. Now you want to think ahead. What's your action plan? What is it you want to do to build your credit? What products might help you do that if you have limited credit history? And so now we're into the green section of tools about looking forward. So this tool will help you think about how to build a credit history and learn about products that may help you get into the system if you don't have a credit history yet. So let's go to the next slide. So this worksheet will help you create an action plan. So we really want you to think about, what it is you want to achieve and who could help you. So the steps to build good credit are get and review your credit report, which hopefully you just did by doing the previous three tools. And I should add that this toolkit, you don't have to do these things in order. I'm presenting them in a certain order, but if you're a consumer or a practitioner helping a consumer, you can go right to the tool that you need. There's no need to do it in order. But I'm just presenting it in a certain flow. But these are all things you can pull out, use as is appropriate. So first, though, if you were to do this in this order, you can get and review your credit report, and then you can research credit building options. And I'm going to tell you something about that in a minute because it's on the back page. And then you want to think about good habits for managing and paying your bills, because that's the most important part of building good credit, which is making sure you're keeping yourself under the credit limit. We'll say more about that in the next tool. Setting up alerts for payment dates so you pay on time, things like that can help you move towards having a good credit history or repair credit if your credit is damaged. And here you can write down resources and organizations who can help you. And the date to complete, this is meant to help people make a plan and hold themselves accountable. So they say, hey, I'm going to get and review my credit report by the end of this month. I'm going to write it down. If you write it down, there's evidence that shows people are more likely to do what they write down and sort of commit to themselves. So this little tool can help you to kind of create that action plan. Now on the back, so next slide, on the back of this tool, there is some information about products that can help you build credit if you, for example, don't have a credit score yet, or if you are trying to increase your credit score in some cases. So there are things like secured credit cards, where you actually put some money down initially and then essentially borrow against it. There are credit builder loans where you pay back a small loan and it gets reported to the credit bureaus, and you don't put up money up front. Essentially, the lender is releasing money to you as you pay. There are other types of credit cards, particularly some retail and things like gas stations have cards that may be easier to get than a typical credit card. You have to use them wisely, obviously. There are things like becoming an authorized user on someone else's credit card, a relative or someone in your family, or things like that can help you start to establish a credit history. And then there's things like getting less traditional payment data like rent. There are some services that can help you get rent reported if you're paying rent regularly. So be careful about these because not all products are right for everybody. There's lots more information available out there, some on our website and other sources as well. So these are some options for building credit for you to kind of look into. Next slide. So now we go into the thing everybody wants to know the most about, which is credit scores. This one is, if you looked at the original way the tools are laid out, this is the one that's smack in the middle because people are most interested in credit scores. Really, credit reports are very, very important. That's the underlying data that companies then take and turn into a score. But people, of course, are focused on scores, and they are important. So we want to help people understand the factors that go into credit scores, identify what you can do to help improve the scores, and how to get a copy of your score if you don't know what it is. So again, the credit score is a number that really companies are using to predict how likely you are to pay back a loan on time. That's what their purpose is. And they're using different mathematical formulas based on that credit history, so the list of your loans, your payment, your history, things like that, to create a score. But each lender is going to do it a little bit differently. So you're going to have different scores that are a little bit different depending on who is creating that score. You don't have a single score, which is sort of complicated and confusing, but that's kind of the way it works. So let's go to the next slide. And this is what companies are using to create credit scores. It's going to be a little different for each company. So for each lender and each bureau, but the basics are, they're looking at your payment track record. Do you make loan payments and pay bills on time? And you can see on this worksheet, you can actually kind of fill in the boxes that describe you, that will help you kind of think about where you fit here. Do you pay on time rarely, sometimes or often? And then next to it, we are listing the ways that you can, how the things you do can impact your score. So if you pay on time, even if it means I only make the minimum payment, you should do that. Pay the full if you can, of course, but you can set up text alerts for your payment date so you don't forget. You can even request a new due date of a bill. For some companies, will change a due date so it matches when you receive your income or benefits. We actually have a separate tool on our website that helps you to map out when things come due and when your income or benefits come in to see what dates you might want to request having moved. So payment track record. The second factor in your credit score is the balances on your different lines of credit. So be it credit card, in this case, credit cards. Do you have a low balance some of the time, rarely or often? And low balances are better than high balances. So for the purposes of your credit score. And so the habits that we're talking about here are trying to pay off your credit card balances each month if you can, and make more than the minimum payment on loans and credit cards when you can. The third, and really the third factor we'll talk about in credit scores, is use of available credit. So companies look at whether you're close to your credit limit. Are you maxing out your cards? Or, and so here you can again say, do I do that often, sometimes, or rarely? And the habit we suggest is to review your credit limit and keep your use as far below it as you can. Many experts advise using less than 30% of your credit limit. So if you have a credit card that has a $5,000 limit, you know, it'd be good to, I shouldn't have chosen that number, I can't do the math. Say a $6,000 limit, 30% would be $2,000. If you can try to keep your balance below that, that will help your credit score. We know you can't always do that, but that is one way to improve your credit score. And there's a little tip here. We did a study looking at people, how much people charge, what people do when they charge things. And a lot of folks will tend to spend more when they charge because they're not necessarily thinking about the fact that you're going to pay interest on that. So you often pay, you know, you're going to pay more if you charge something, if you put something on a credit card, if you're not paying off your balance every month. And so you may want to create your own rule saying, hey, if it's a small item, I really don't want to finance, you know, my cup of coffee. I want to pay for it. And so, you know, thinking about when to use cash as opposed to credit, there's some things you can, and some resources we have on that, but something to think about as you're determining when you use credit. And then the fourth and final thing that goes into your credit report, your credit score, is your types of credit and the length of the history. Do you have experience? Do you have a history of using more than one type of credit, like mortgage, student loan, auto loan, credit card? This is where, you know, you may be a great manager of your money, and so I don't use much credit. You know, I don't need a car, I don't own a home, I try not to use credit cards because I don't want to run up a bill. The problem is if you have too few lines of credit, the credit bureaus and lenders feel like they don't have enough information to know how you're going to behave with credit. So if you can, and it doesn't create problems for you, it's good to have a couple of different kinds of accounts, as long as you use them responsibly and you know, don't get yourself in trouble. And so the suggestions or the habits we mentioned are that, you know, the longer you have your accounts and pay them on time, the more it's going to help your score. So you may not want to close accounts if you have them. If they're not causing you trouble, leave them open, don't use them. That will actually help your score. And you may want to talk to a financial coach or a counselor about whether opening a new account might be a good idea. It's not always a good idea, but it might be in order to give yourself a wider a wider array of types of credit. Wasn't the easiest phrase to say there, that will help your score. So again, it's these four things: payment track record, balances, use of available credit, and types of credit and length of history that go into your score. That sounds really complicated, and it is, which is why people are confused about scores and what they mean. But the important thing is if you try to follow some of these habits we listed, that will help your score go up. It will improve your score, especially the first one, which is paying everything on time. That's the single most important one, I think, generally. So next slide. We're coming close to the end here, which is good. People want to know how to get their score. Just quickly, it's more important to make sure your credit history is accurate, disputing errors, the things we talked about earlier. That's the stuff that really matters. The score, you know, unless you're about to get a loan, may not matter as much. You should focus on having good financial habits, which will improve your score. But if you do need to see your score, some credit card companies and other lenders actually will let you see the score that they use to evaluate you. So you should check with your credit card company, see if they do that, or your mortgage. You can go to a nonprofit financial counselor or housing counselor or coach. They can usually get your score for you. And there are some places that will offer you your score for free. Just make sure that, you know, when you do that, they will then probably try to sell you things afterwards. So just be careful, be smart about, you know, whether that's a good idea for you. And I'll just note there is more than one credit score, as I mentioned earlier. There are different ways to do it. And so you may have a range of different scores. They're usually pretty close in number. You're usually not going to have one low score and one high score. But you don't have a single number. You'll have multiple numbers that kind of describe what lenders think is your likelihood of repaying, basically. Okay, so next tool. This is just an interesting idea of helping you think about whether to use credit or not. For those people who have access to credit and are making decisions about, should I charge this or not, This tool can help you do that, help you think about upcoming purchases, and weigh the costs and risks of using credit. So if you go to the next slide, this is an interesting tool. We haven't seen it in other places, but this helps you to weigh benefits, costs, and risks. And so if you're thinking of buying something and not sure whether to charge it, you can use this worksheet to fill out what are you thinking of buying, what will this help you do or accomplish. You know, it forces you to think a little bit about, do I really need this? What will this do for me? How much does it cost? How much can I pay for it with savings? You can fill that out and then think about, what is the cost of credit? What fees or interest rate are you paying, say, on your credit card? How long would you need to make the payments? If you can't pay it off in full, what's your estimated monthly payment if you charge this item? And there are online credit card loan calculators that can help you estimate that. And then weigh the risks of using credit, the third column. Can I comfortably make this payment every month? Yes, no, I'm not sure. What are the consequences of not making the payments? I could say lose my housing if I, or lose my car if I don't pay my auto loan. My interest rate could increase if I don't make payments. So the idea about this is to really make people think about whether to charge something and how much it will cost them over time. And so at the bottom, you can make a decision. I'll hold off on buying this, or I'm going to use this much from savings and this much of my credit line to purchase something. And so it just kind of makes you think about all that. So it could be useful for you or people that you're working with if you're a practitioner. So next slide. I'm going to jump over this. This is to help people think about how much money they receive each month and the expenses, sort of a budgeting tool. It's a little, it's not quite as relevant right now, so I'm going to jump over that just for time purposes. And this too, we have a video that describes credit building loans. This should have actually been earlier in the presentation. I put it in the wrong place. But this just is a little video for those of you who prefer to learn through video rather than reading. We have a video on our website that it's just 3 minutes long, and it describes credit building loans, secured credit cards, and retail cards and how they work. So maybe something you would want to look at if you would like to learn that way. So we'll move on to the next slide. And this is the last tool that we're going to describe. It's red, right, because this is for an immediate need. And if somebody has had identity theft, go right to this tool. Don't go through all the other ones. But this will help you know what to do if you have been a victim of identity theft or fraud, and find resources to help you and know what to do when that happens. So if you go to the next slide, this is the worksheet for this. It tells you the 3 things to do if you've been the victim of identity theft or fraud. First, you need to call the company where the fraud occurred. You'll need to have your account number or credit card number. If you want to do it online, you'll need your login information, and you want to explain that your identity was stolen, ask them to close the accounts or remove the fraudulent charges, and then change your usernames, passwords, PIN numbers. And the tip that we offer too is that you might want to consider changing passwords for other accounts because possibly your other accounts were off or were also compromised. So first you do that. Next, the second step is to report the theft to the Federal Trade Commission, another federal agency which tracks identity theft. And here you'll want to report the type of information stolen, how it was used, your own personal information, so they'll know who this happened to. If you have any information on who you think stole your identity, you may not if it was a data breach, but you may if it was, God forbid, a family member or somebody else that you might know. And then any information on steps you've taken. You can do this online through identitytheft.gov. And then you should also order your credit reports, as we discussed earlier, to see if these things have appeared on your credit reports and put a fraud alert on there. And then that is, in fact, the third step. You'll want to go to to the credit reporting companies, or at least one of them, and then that will trigger it on all 3. And you want to place a fraud alert on your credit report. If you go to your credit report, there is a way to put a fraud alert on, and that will then trigger additional actions credit reporting companies will have to take before they'll let somebody open credit in your name. You'll be able to actually, normally you'd be able to see your credit report more frequently if you have a fraud alert. Right now, as I mentioned, you can see it weekly anyways, and so I said it's not as necessary right now, but that is a benefit. And so then the last, if you go to the next slide, there's some more information on how you can also report things to the police, how to file a police report, and how to put a security freeze on your credit report so that people cannot open credit in your name. They can't check your credit in order to open a credit for someone else. So that is a useful service. I won't say much about it now, but you can look into that more if you want to place a freeze on your credit. It will prevent a lot of types of identity theft, but will also prevent you from getting credit because you'd have to unfreeze it in order to apply for credit and then refreeze it. But it's something you may want to consider doing. So those are all the tools that we wanted to share. I'm going to say a few other things in the last couple of minutes before we open for questions. So if you could go to the next slide. I covered today this toolkit, as you know, that I was describing, which you can order. But we also have a number of one-page handouts that are kind of simpler, just more information. They don't have things to fill out like this toolkit did. But particularly if you're a financial educator, this is a nice thing to hand out. If you're meeting with people, they can take things home on how to check a credit report, understanding your credit score, how to rebuild your credit if you have had credit problems, how to build credit from scratch. So we talked about most of these things today already, but these are little one-pagers that you could use or share with friends and family or with clients. So these are all available on our website. If you go to the next slide, you can order them on this Resources for Financial Educators page, where it's consumerfinance.gov/adult-financial-education. Not the catchiest, but if you go there, there's an Explore Resources place, and there's a section just on credit reports and scores, and you can see that the things I was just telling you, how to check your credit report, understand your credit score, those little one-pagers you can download or order free copies just right on the website. So going to the next slide, if you wanted a copy of the booklet we just went through or one of the other ones, the ones on bills, debt, or savings, you can get all of that at consumerfinance.gov/your-money-your-goals, your money, your goals, and you'll see where to access those materials there. Going on to the next slide, we're in the home stretch here. I want to end quickly by saying we get that people are struggling with the coronavirus pandemic and all the financial implications. We have been doing a lot of work to think about how to help people protect their finances. We totally understand that. So we have a resource page, consumerfinance.gov/coronavirus, that has a number of tools on it, or information in this case, not really tools. So if you go to the next slide, in particular, it covers a number of topics, but there is a section just on credit called Protecting Your Credit During the Coronavirus Pandemic. If you go to the next slide, these are screenshots. I know they're a little harder to get in an accessible format, but there are 5 steps we suggest you do. Most important, if you can't make payments, if you're having trouble because your finances have been affected, you need to contact your lenders. There are a lot of lenders can do things to reduce your interest rates, give you forbearance where you can not pay for a little bit, delay payments, give you loan extensions. So you need to reach out. That's very important. Next slide. There are some specific protections on credit reporting. The CARES Act was the legislation that was passed a few months ago to help consumers during the pandemic. And so there are some requirements that lenders and credit reporting companies have about how they report. If you get some of these sort of hardship relief, like getting to delay some loan payments, there are requirements on how those get reported. You can find out details about that on the website. You can follow up to see and make sure that your company is doing that correctly. So next slide. I'm just jumping over these real fast. Again, get a copy of a credit report. Thank you. Someone's hurrying me along here. Check your reports routinely. Dispute accurate information. These are all the things I covered earlier, but they're laid out on the coronavirus page. We want to make sure people do these things if they have been affected by the pandemic. And let's see, what's next? And we just want to mention there's also one on dealing with debt, which is very relevant, again, to credit issues. There's a whole section on debt called Dealing with Debt During the Coronavirus Pandemic. And then I believe my very last slide, I'll be just 1 minute over my time. The last slide is there is also multiple federal agencies put together this mortgage and housing assistance page during coronavirus, which has information on mortgage relief options, some of which are required by law, protections for renters, how to avoid scams. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but let you know that it is out here. I'm assuming that NDI will send out some information after the fact, but you can get to this page and find lots of information if you're struggling with housing related issues because of oh, there we go, coronavirus.gov. Thank you. It was right there and I didn't see it. That is available to give you information as well. So I know I've thrown a lot at you. I would be happy to answer questions. Again, everything I've said is on our website. You can order these tools. If you're a consumer, you can use them yourself. If you're an educator, you can use them with your clients. So I will stop there and take any questions that people may have.
Great, Irene. Thank you so much for sharing this great information and these wonderful tools with everyone. I learned some new things today as well, so this has been really, really great. Just a reminder to everyone that the recording of the webinar will be available at the National Disability Institute's website, and the recording, the archive of it will be placed. It takes about a week for it to get put up, but please be sure to check out our website. We do have a couple questions that we would like to ask. First of all, Irene, a question came in. Can an unmarried client transfer some credit off the other to help bring ratios down?
Whoa, that is a good question. I don't, there'll be some super detailed questions that may not be, you may need to actually consult, a credit counselor. I mean, I think my thought is this is not financial advice, this one, is that I think going forward, you can have a different person charge something for you, but I don't think you can get rid of debt like transfer debt that way. Again, I would consult with someone for guidance on that, but that, I think once the debt is yours, it's yours.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good question that came in as well. And so we see who sent that, so we will look at that a little bit further as well. So that was a good one. When does a credit record start? Do I get one when I turn 18 or I get my first job, even if I don't have any credit, or does it start when I have my first credit account?
That is a fabulous question. I love it, and I can answer it. I love questions that I can answer. So very interesting. No, you do not get a credit account until you start using credit. So there are people, as I mentioned, there's 45 million people, and about half of those people never have a credit account. Some people their entire lives never have a credit card. If you never use credit and never access credit, or if you never don't pay your bills, because you can also not pay your electric bill and that can get reported. That would give you a credit history as well. It doesn't start automatically, and that is why it's actually important to think about when someone is, becoming an adult, turning 18 or graduating from high school or college or starting a first job, is figuring out how to enter the credit system in a positive way. A lot of people enter the credit system. They may get a student loan, right? If you're a student, it's easier to get a loan because the college may help you access one. Some people become co-signers with a parent or a relative. Sometimes you can get products like the secured credit card or credit building loan product that I mentioned. So basically, most people make that transition in their younger days, but not everyone does. So the key thing is to start off on the right foot. Quite a few people do start off with their first entry. We did a study on first entry into credit. What product was the entry point? And for some people, their first entry was through a collections account. Often they have a cell phone or utility bills, or in some cases, unfortunately, medical bills they don't pay them, and they enter the credit system through a negative collections report. You're going to start off with a really low score if that's your entry point. So it's important to think about how to make that transition in a positive way. And so one handout I referenced, Building Credit from Scratch, will give you information on how to do that through, for example, getting a secured credit card or something like that that can help that transition. So excellent question. There are some people who, when they hit 18, they do have a credit record because somebody used their identity when they were kids. Often not with ill intent. Sometimes it's a parent who needs to turn the electricity back on and their own credit isn't good. So there are ways to get that off your record if that happens to you. It's a hassle, but it can be done. So you shouldn't have any credit when you hit 18. If you do, something bad happened. So sorry for the long answer, but that was an excellent question.
Great. So we're coming up on the end of our time. Something in the chat box. Katie, if we could just pull up the last polling questions before we do our wrap up.
Oh yeah, I want to see the answers.
So the polling questions have come up, and we will share this with you too, Irene, afterwards. But how much do you know about credit, or how much do you know about getting free copies of your 3 credit reports? So again, the same answers as before. I don't know anything. I know a little. I know a lot. So please respond. How much do you know about understanding what is on the credit reports? Again, choose one of the 3 responses that I just mentioned. And finally, how much do you know about steps you can take to build better credit? Again, I don't know anything about this. I know a little about this, and I know a lot about this. So we want to find out how much you've gained from the presentation. So just take a few seconds to answer. All right, so we'll close out the polling. So we are coming up on our time. We have 2 minutes left. I see that some more questions have come in and we have a few others. I just want to remind everyone that if you send your answer, oh, great, Katie put up the polling responses. If you have any questions after the webinar, please send them to ask@ndi-inc.org. And for the questions that have come in, we will also follow up. Next slide, please. Just to remind everyone, at the National Disability Institute, as we're working to address COVID-19 as well, we've created an online resource center for people with disabilities and chronic health conditions. You can go to nationaldisabilityinstitute.org, and on our homepage, right there, you'll see the information for the Financial Resilience Center. So please check that out, as it provides up-to-date information for individuals with navigating financial wellness during the COVID-19. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, if you have any questions on the financial wellness product, please send an email to ask@ndi-inc.org. Next slide. Again, we'd like to say a special thank you to the Illinois Council on Developmental Disabilities for their partnership with the Financial Wellness Program for people with disabilities in the state of Illinois, and for their leadership and seeing the importance of financial wellness for people with disabilities. As we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, we see that one of the proper goals that clearly states is economic self-sufficiency. So as we celebrate this wonderful civil rights legislation, remember, economic self-sufficiency is one of the proper goals that the civil rights legislation does provide us. With that, I'd also like to say thank you to Irene Scritti with CFPB for sharing this excellent information with us today. And thank you to my colleagues who helped to put all of this together. And thanks to each of you for participating today. We appreciate you spending this time with us. We hope everybody has a great day, and stay well and stay safe. Thank you.